This party isn't for losers. My father didn't raise his voice when he said it. He didn't need to. The music was already playing in the background. Soft jazz. The kind people choose when they want to sound expensive. I could hear glasses clinking. The murmur of voices trying a little too hard to sound confident. I'm serious. Carmen, he added. We have people here tonight who've actually built something. Investors. Business owners. I don't need distractions. I stood in my small apartment in San Antonio, still in jeans and a plain navy sweater. My uniform hung pressed inside the closet untouched. I hadn't planned on wearing it. Distractions, I repeated. You know what I mean. I did. He meant I didn't look like success in the way he understood it. He meant I didn't drive the right car. He meant I didn't have a spouse or a big house or a startup to pitch between appetizers. He meant I made him uncomfortable. I think you're right, I said evenly. Winners should pay their own bills. He gave a short dismissive laugh. Exactly. I ended the call. Then I opened my banking app. And that was the moment everything changed. My name is Carmen Vega. I'm 34 years old and I've been in the United States Army for 16 years. I don't talk about it much. I don't hang my commendations in the living room. I don't post patriotic captions online. I pay my bills. I save my money. I keep my word. 3 years ago, my brother Marcus's construction business collapsed. Not dramatically, not overnight, just quietly through a series of bad contracts and worse decisions. When the foreclosure notice came on his old house, he called me. Not Dad. Car. I just need a bridge, he'd said. Voice low and shaky. Just until the next project lands. There is something about hearing fear in your older brother's voice that rewrites your logic. I didn't wire cash into his account. I wired the security deposit directly to Ridgewood Property Management. $5,200. That's what it took to secure a 4-bedroom rental in North Austin at $2,650 a month. Marcus's credit score was 612 at the time. Not catastrophic. Not stable. The property manager, Diane, I remember her name clearly, explained it calmly. We can approve the lease with a qualified guarantor, she said. Someone with verifiable income and strong credit. That someone was me. I signed electronically. My name attached to their lease. 6 months later, Brooke wanted the black SUV. Clients notice what you drive, she'd said. The lease required a cosigner. Again, that was me. I didn't intend to stay attached forever. But every time Marcus missed a payment, every time there was a tight month, I covered it, not out of obligation, out of love for Caleb and Sophia. My niece and nephew didn't ask for instability. My father knew I helped out. He did not know that without my credit and my income verification, that house would never have been approved in the first place. He preferred the story that Marcus was rebuilding. He preferred the version where his sun was rising. I never corrected him until tonight. When I opened my banking app, the numbers didn't feel dramatic. They felt routine. Recurring auto pay Oakmont lease guarantee. Recurring auto pay Summit auto leasing. I didn't rush. I read through each agreement carefully. Texas leasing law allows a guarantor to withdraw with written notice. The property manager then has the right to reassess the lease within a defined period. I had reviewed those clauses 3 years ago. I remembered them. I selected the lease account first. Withdraw guarantor authorization. A confirmation screen appeared. Are you sure? Yes. Then the vehicle lease. Remove auto pay. Confirm. I stared at the updated dashboard for a long moment. No fireworks. No surge of adrenaline. Just quiet. That word loser hadn't made me angry. It had made me clear. For 3 years I had been the invisible safety net beneath their image. And my father had just informed me I didn't belong in the picture. At 8:42 p.m., my phone rang. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later it rang again. Then a text. Car. Did you cancel something? I didn't answer. Not yet. I made tea. Sat at the table. Waited. At 9:05 p.m. Another message came through. The leasing company says the payment failed. What's going on? Then the property manager just emailed about the guarantor. Then call me now. I picked up the phone and finally dialed him. He answered on the first ring. What did you do? He demanded. I withdrew. From what? The lease. The auto pay. There was silence on the line. Not disbelief. Calculation. You can't just do that. He said finally. I can. We have a dinner tonight. I know. With Mr. Preston. I know. This makes us look unstable. That's not my responsibility. His voice lowered. Is this about what Dad said? Yes. You're overreacting. No. I said calmly. I'm adjusting. He exhaled sharply. We don't have the liquidity to cover everything right now. You'll need to find it. You're punishing us. I'm stepping back. There's a difference. He didn't see it yet. He would. I ended the call. Outside my apartment window traffic moved normally. A dog barked. Someone laughed in the parking lot. Life didn't pause for family dynamics. At 9:40 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Ridgewood Property Management. Subject: Acknowledgement of guarantor withdrawal. Oakmont lease. Effective immediately. Your status as guarantor has been removed. Tenants have been notified of reassessment period. Further documentation required within 10 business days. Professional. Clear. No drama. Consequences don't need to shout. They just arrive. I set my phone down. Across town. My father was likely explaining why I wasn't there. Across town. My brother was likely refreshing his inbox. And across town. For the first time in 3 years. Their future wasn't resting quietly on my signature. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. And it had only just begun. The next morning, the silence broke. It wasn't explosive. It was administrative. At 8:12 a.m., Marcus sent a screenshot of the email from Ridgewood. Subject: Lease reassessment notice. Oakmont. The body was clean and direct. Due to the withdrawal of the listed guarantor, updated income verification and credit documentation must be submitted within 10 business days. Failure to provide qualifying documentation may result in lease termination under Section 14C. Below it, Marcus had typed, "What exactly are you doing?" I didn't respond immediately. I was already at base reviewing logistics reports with my unit. Life doesn't pause because your family is unraveling. At 9:03 a.m., Dad called. I stepped outside before answering. "Carmen," he said, voice tight but controlled. "What's this about the lease?" "I withdrew as guarantor." "You didn't warn anyone." "I did," I said. "Last night." "That was emotion." "No, that was information." He exhaled sharply. "You don't understand how this looks." "I understand exactly how it looks. They're asking for income documentation." He said. "Marcus doesn't meet the threshold alone." "I'm aware. You've put them in a position." "No," I corrected. I removed myself from one. Silence. Then he shifted tactics. "This affects the kids. It always comes back to that. The reassessment period is 10 business days." I replied. "No one is being evicted today." "That's not the point." "It is the point," I said evenly. "Consequences don't happen instantly. They happen when paperwork catches up." He lowered his voice. "You embarrassed me last night." "I wasn't there." "You made a statement. You called me a loser." "That was taken out of context." "What was the context?" I asked calmly. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Mr. Preston noticed your absence." I almost smiled. "Did he?" He asked why you weren't there. "And what did you tell him?" "That you were busy." I let that sit, because that was the first honest thing he'd said. By midday, Brooke texted. We have 10 days. Marcus is pulling credit reports. We're trying. That word again. Trying. 3 years ago, when I first signed the guarantor agreement, Marcus had promised stability within 6 months. 6 months became a year. A year became once the market improves. Trying is a moving target when there's always someone else covering the gap. At 2:17 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Summit Auto Leasing. I stepped outside again. Ms. Vega? The representative asked. We received your request to remove auto pay authorization on the Vega account. Yes. Just confirming you are no longer financially responsible for the lease payments. Correct. There is currently one payment past due. If not resolved within 14 days, the vehicle will enter recovery status. 14 days. Not cinematic. Not immediate. Procedural. Understood. I said. Would you like to receive further notifications? No. Please direct all correspondence to the primary leaseholder. Very well. When I hung up, the clarity felt steadier than the night before. This wasn't an emotional explosion. It was a timeline. 10 business days for the lease reassessment. 14 days before vehicle recovery. Structured. Predictable. Adult. That evening, Marcus called again. This time his voice wasn't angry. It was strained. They need proof of income at 3 times monthly rent, he said. That's $7,950 combined. And I'm at $500 right now. Then you'll need to increase income or reduce housing. He was quiet. Dad can't qualify, he added. I know. He tried to offer his pension as supplemental. That won't be enough. He exhaled. You really aren't coming back into this. It wasn't a question. No. Silence stretched. You could have just talked to us, he said. I did. When? Every month when I paid. He didn't respond. I continued. I never hid the paperwork from you. You signed every lease. You saw my name on every guarantee. That was temporary. So was my patience. That landed harder than I intended. He swallowed audibly. What if we downsize? He asked quietly. That's a solution. It'll look bad. To who? He didn't answer. Because we both knew the answer. Dad. The church group. The networking circle. Not the kids. Not reality. Appearances. You're choosing pride over family, he said finally. No, I replied. I'm choosing sustainability over image. Another silence. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted. That was the first honest sentence of the entire conversation. You start by looking at what you actually earn, I said. Not what you wish you earned. And if we lose the house? You won't lose it tomorrow. And in 30 days. Then you sign a voluntary termination and find something within your budget. He didn't argue this time. He just breathed. You've changed, he said. No, I replied. I stopped cushioning. That night I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I ran numbers. Austin rental averages. Median income thresholds. Credit score impact from lease termination versus eviction filing. I wasn't trying to calculate their downfall. I was calculating reality. At 10:07 p.m., another email arrived from Ridgewood. Subject reminder. Lease documentation pending Oakmont. 10 days. The clock was visible now. Across town my father was likely pacing. Marcus was likely printing bank statements. Brooke was likely calculating what furniture could be sold. For the first time in years, I wasn't involved in the spreadsheet. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel powerful. I felt proportionate. The responsibility matched the ownership. The risk matched the signature. For 3 years those had been uneven. Now they were aligned. I closed my laptop. Outside the night was quiet. No flashing lights. No spectacle. Just timelines ticking forward. And for once they weren't ticking on my account. On the 7th day of the reassessment period, Dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. He didn't call first, he never does when he thinks he can talk someone into something face to face. I opened the door in workout clothes. Hair tied back. No makeup. He looked around my small living room the way he always does. Like he's evaluating potential instead of seeing reality. It's clean, he said as if that were a compliment. It's mine, I replied. He stepped inside without being invited and sat down at the kitchen table. I didn't offer coffee. Carmen, he began, folding his hands like he was about to negotiate a land deal. We've reviewed the numbers. I'm sure you have. They're short. How short? About $2,800 a month. That tracked. Marcus's income plus Brooke's part-time commissions wouldn't meet the 3 times rent threshold Ridgewood required. So, I said calmly. You downsize. Dad shook his head. Moving costs. Application fees. Deposit. It compounds. Yes. It does. You could cover the difference for 6 months, he said. Voice softening. Just until Marcus lands the next contract. I met his eyes. We've used that sentence before. This is different. How? He hesitated. Because it wasn't. It would buy time, he said finally. It would buy delay, I corrected. He leaned back in the chair and studied me. You're being rigid. I'm being consistent. You've always been like this, he muttered. Like what? Unyielding. I thought about 16 years in the army. Discipline isn't cruelty. Boundaries aren't hostility. They're structure. You called me a loser, I said evenly. He looked away. I was frustrated. You were honest, that's not true. Then tell me, I said quietly. In what context is your daughter a loser? The silence stretched. He didn't have an answer. Instead, he pivoted. Mr. Preston called me yesterday. That caught my attention. And? He asked if we'd secured financing. And you told him that we're working through internal adjustments. I nodded once. He said something. Dad continued, voice lower now. He said a family that hides liabilities won't survive investment. I didn't respond. He said he respected you. Dad added reluctantly. For what? For not pretending. That landed differently than any accusation. Dad rubbed his forehead. I didn't realize how much of this was you. You didn't ask. I assumed Marcus was managing it. You assumed a lot. He exhaled slowly. You've always made it look easy. Paying someone else's rent isn't easy. I said. It's just quiet. We sat there for a moment. The hum of my refrigerator filled the room. So, what now? He asked finally. You have 3 days left on the reassessment. They won't approve us. Then you request voluntary termination. That's humiliating. No, I said. It's practical. He shook his head. You don't understand how that feels. I understand exactly how it feels. I replied. It feels like being told you don't belong somewhere. That stopped him. Because we both knew what he had said. He stood up slowly. You're not going to budge. No. Even if they have to move into something smaller? Yes. He looked around my apartment again. This is smaller. Yes. I said. And you're satisfied? I'm stable. There's a difference. He studied me like he was seeing something unfamiliar. Maybe he was. For most of my life I'd been the accommodating one. The fixer. The one who smoothed over conflict. This version of me wasn't louder. She was steadier. He walked toward the door. At least come to dinner Sunday. He said, not turning around. Not for me. For the kids. I considered it. I'll think about it. He nodded once and left. 2 days later Marcus called. They denied the reassessment, he said bluntly. I had expected that. What are you doing? I asked. We submitted a voluntary termination request and they gave us 30 days. That was better than eviction. Less damaging to credit. Cleaner exit. You'll lose the deposit, he added. Yes. That was your money. Yes. Silence. You're not asking for it back, he asked cautiously. No. He swallowed. I thought you might. It was security. It served its purpose. He didn't argue. We found a townhouse, he said after a moment. 3 bedrooms, $1,850 a month. That was realistic. Good. It's not in a gated community. Most people don't live in one. He gave a small humorless laugh. I know. There was a shift in his tone. Less resistance. More acceptance. I didn't realize how much pressure I was under trying to keep up, he admitted quietly. With who? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Dad. The networking group. The illusion of rising. I thought if I looked successful long enough I'd become it, he said. That's not how it works. I see that now. There was no anger in him. Just fatigue. We'll move next week, he said. Okay. He hesitated. Are you coming Sunday? For dinner? Yeah. I thought about Dad sitting at the head of the table measuring worth by appearances. I'll come, I said finally. Thanks. When we hung up I felt something settle. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Just balance. The lease would end. The house would be packed into boxes. The SUV would enter recovery status in a few days unless they found a way to pay it off. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Procedural. I wasn't watching their downfall. I was watching gravity work. And for the first time in years. I wasn't trying to hold anything up. Sunday dinner wasn't formal. No catering. No investors. No polished performance. Just family. I arrived a few minutes early. The SUV was still in the driveway. But I knew the timeline. Summit Auto Leasing had a 14-day grace window. Today was day 12. 2 days left. The front door opened before I knocked. Sophia threw her arms around my waist. You came, she said like it wasn't obvious. I said I would. Inside the house already looked different. Not empty yet, but thinning. A bookshelf was missing from the hallway. One of the abstract art pieces Brooke loved was gone from the living room wall. Sold. I assumed. Marcus stood in the kitchen stirring something on the stove. Brooke was at the table sorting through a stack of mail. Dad sat at the head of the table quieter than usual. Evening, he said when he saw me. Evening. No comments about what I was wearing. No remarks about success. Just neutral. We sat down. The food was simple. Roast chicken. Potatoes. Green beans. No imported wine. Just iced tea. Halfway through dinner, Marcus cleared his throat. We're signing the townhouse lease tomorrow, he said. Dad nodded once. It's manageable, Brooke added. How far from here? I asked. 20 minutes, Marcus replied. Still Austin. Just not north side. Translation. Not the right zip code. That's fine, I said. Caleb looked up. Do we still get internet? He asked seriously. Marcus smiled faintly. Yes. Buddy. Sophia poked at her potatoes. Will Grandpa visit us there? All eyes turned to Dad. He hesitated. Yes. He said after a moment. Of course. That felt important. After dinner, Marcus stepped outside with me while Brooke cleaned up. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the driveway. I called the leasing company. He said quietly. And? They gave us until Tuesday before recovery status. Can you cover it? He shook his head. Not without maxing everything. And then what? Then we'd be in the same position in a month. I nodded. So? We're letting it go. That was the first truly grounded decision he'd made in years. It's just a car, I said. It felt bigger than that. I know. He leaned against the porch railing. I used to think you were rigid. He admitted. I am. But now I get it. Get what? That stability is boring. He said. And boring is good. I almost smiled. Most people don't learn that until later. He glanced at me. Did you ever want more? More what? Bigger house. Nicer car. Something flashier. I thought about my apartment. My truck. My savings account. My freedom. No. I said honestly. I wanted control. He nodded slowly. Inside. Dad's voice carried faintly through the open door. He wasn't laughing loudly like he used to. He was listening. Tuesday came quietly. At 3:17 p.m., Marcus texted. It's gone. No photo. No drama. Just that. I imagined the tow truck arriving in daylight. Neighbors at work. No audience. Cleaner? I replied. Okay. He sent one more message. Feels weird. I typed back. It will. Then nothing. That evening Dad called. It happened, he said. I know. They were professional about it. They usually are. He paused. I went over to watch. To be there. That surprised me. How did it go? They didn't argue. He said. Marcus handed over the keys. That's good. Another silence. I told him I'd help with the move. Dad added. Good. He cleared his throat. I've been thinking about the word I used. I didn't respond. He continued. I was projecting. I let that sit. I thought if Marcus looked successful it reflected well on me. He said. And if you didn't fit that picture it threatened it. Yes. I said. That wasn't fair. No. He inhaled slowly. You're not a loser. I know. I shouldn't have said it. I know. He paused. I don't say things like that lightly. That's why it mattered. Silence. Then quietly. I was wrong. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was uncomfortable and real. I appreciate you saying that. I replied. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just understood. By the end of the week the house looked hollow. Boxes stacked by the door. Curtains taken down. Echo in the living room. I stopped by once before they handed over the keys. No grand speech. No symbolism. Just logistics. Brooke handed me a small envelope. What's this? I asked. First month's repayment. She said. I opened it. $400 in cash. That's not necessary. I said. It is. She replied. We're not going back. I nodded once and tucked it into my pocket. Not because I needed it. Because it meant something. As we locked the front door for the last time, Dad stood quietly on the sidewalk. He didn't comment on the smaller townhouse. He didn't mention status. He just carried a box to his truck. And for the first time, no one was pretending this was temporary. It was simply the next chapter. Not flashy. Not impressive. Just sustainable. Moving day felt smaller than I expected. No speeches. No dramatic confrontations. Just cardboard, tape and the sound of furniture legs scraping hardwood. I showed up early not because I had to, but because I wanted to see it through. The Oakmont house looked hollow. The echo in the living room was louder than any argument we'd had in it. Marcus was carrying a mattress toward the rented truck. Brooke was labeling boxes with a black marker. Kitchen. Kids' room. Winter clothes. Dad stood near the garage sorting through a small stack of tools like he wasn't sure which ones he still needed. Morning, I said. Morning, Marcus replied. No edge in his voice. Just tired acceptance. The SUV-shaped space in the driveway was clean now. Sunlight had evened out the concrete where it used to sit. There was something symbolic about that. Absences fade faster than we expect. Townhouse keys are ready at noon, Brooke said. Good, I answered. We worked without commentary for a while. I lifted boxes, wrapped fragile items, secured straps in the truck. There's something grounding about manual labor. It forces silence into productivity. Around 11:30 a.m., Dad walked over while I was tightening a ratchet strap. I listed the watch, he said quietly. The gold one? I asked without looking up. Yes, that's a start. He nodded. I also called the networking group. And I told them I'm stepping back. That surprised me. For how long? Until I'm not chasing something. I straightened and faced him. That sounds healthy. He looked at the empty house. I was trying to build a legacy. You can't build one on borrowed money. He didn't argue. By noon the truck was packed. We drove in a slow line to the townhouse complex. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't gated. It was real. The townhouse had a narrow staircase and a kitchen half the size of the old one. But when Sophia ran inside and claimed her room, she didn't look disappointed. She looked excited. "I get to paint this wall," she declared. Caleb immediately claimed the corner spot in the living room for his gaming setup. Marcus carried in the couch, breathing hard. "We'll make it work," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "Yes," I replied. "You will." That afternoon we assembled beds and plugged in lamps. At one point Dad stood in the small living room, turning slowly like he was recalibrating his understanding of scale. "It's enough," he said finally. "Yes," I agreed. That word meant more than square footage. Over the next few weeks something shifted. Not dramatically. Gradually. Marcus picked up extra contracts. Smaller ones but steady. Brooke increased her hours at the real estate office. Not luxury listings. Just starter homes. The repayment envelope grew. $400 became $600 the next month. They insisted. I didn't argue. Not because I needed the money, but because they needed to give it. Dad started coming to Caleb's soccer games. He didn't sit at the center of the bleachers. He sat near the edge. Quiet. Watching. One afternoon after a game he walked beside me toward the parking lot. "I underestimated you," he said. "In what way?" "I thought discipline made you rigid." "It does." He smiled faintly. "But it also made you stable." "That was the goal." He nodded slowly. "I confused flash with success. Most people do." He looked at my truck. "You ever think about upgrading?" "No." He chuckled softly. "Figures." We stood there for a moment. "I don't need you to rescue us anymore," he said. "That's good. I don't want distance." "You won't have it," I replied. "As long as respect stays." He met my eyes. "It will." It wasn't poetic. It wasn't sentimental. It was measured. And that's what made it believable. 3 months after that phone call, the one that started everything, we had dinner again. This time at the townhouse. No guests. No image to maintain. Just us. The table was smaller. The chairs didn't match. But the conversation flowed easier. At one point, Brooke passed me a dish and said, "We're finally within budget." That sentence would have embarrassed her 6 months ago. Now it sounded like pride. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "It's weird," he admitted. "I sleep better." "Because you're not juggling payments?" I asked. "Because I'm not pretending." Dad nodded slowly. "That's a heavy thing to carry." "Yes," I said. After dinner, Sophia showed me her finished mural. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. On the drive home, I thought about that night. The one where my father said the party wasn't for losers. At the time, it felt like an insult. Now it felt like a turning point. Not because I'd punished anyone, but because I'd stopped participating in something unsustainable. There's a difference between revenge and recalibration. Revenge is loud. Recalibration is quiet. It's a cancelled guarantee, a withdrawn signature, a boundary that holds. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them feel the weight they've been avoiding. The townhouse lights were still on in my rearview mirror as I turned onto the highway. Smaller house, smaller car, bigger honesty, and for the first time in a long time, none of it required my credit score. That wasn't winning. It was balance. About 4 months after the move, I got a letter in the mail. Not a bill, not a notice. A handwritten envelope with my father's uneven block print across the front. He's never been a man who writes letters. I opened it at my kitchen table. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No dramatic language. No apologies stretched across paragraphs. Just a few lines. "Carmen, I've been thinking about the night I called you a loser. I've built most of my life measuring things I could see. Houses, cars, titles. I didn't know how to measure what you built. That was my failure. Not yours, Dad. I read it twice. Then I folded it and set it on the table. There was no swelling music. No sudden tears. Just a quiet recognition that something had shifted in him. Not overnight. Over months. Over smaller rent payments and tighter budgets. Over watching Marcus take smaller contracts instead of pitching bigger illusions. Over sitting in bleachers instead of dining rooms. That kind of change doesn't happen in a dramatic moment. It happens in repetition. The SUV never came back. Marcus bought a used Ford Explorer from a dealership in Round Rock. $11,800. No co-signer. High interest rate, but manageable. He showed it to me one afternoon like a teenager showing off a first car. It's not fancy, he said. It's yours, I replied. That word again. Ownership changes posture. Brooke stopped talking about clients noticing. She talked about closing small deals consistently. Caleb's soccer team made playoffs. Sophia painted another wall. And I remained what I had always been. Steady. One Saturday morning, Dad asked if I wanted to grab coffee. Just the two of us. We hadn't done that in years. We sat at a small diner off I-35. Vinyl booths. Burnt coffee. Nothing impressive. He stirred his cup for a long time before speaking. I thought success meant expanding, he said. Expanding what? I asked. Everything. House. Contacts. Influence. And now? He looked out the window at the parking lot. Now I think it means sustaining. That was new. Marcus is doing better, he continued. Not bigger. Just better. I nodded. And I'm sleeping better, he added. That matters. He met my eyes. I didn't realize I was building my pride on top of your credit. I didn't answer right away. I let you, I said eventually. That part's on me. He frowned. You were helping. I was avoiding conflict. He absorbed that. I don't want that dynamic anymore, he said. Neither do I. We didn't shake hands. We didn't make declarations. We just finished our coffee. A week later I got another envelope. This one thicker. Inside was a copy of the final lease termination statement from Ridgewood Property Management. Balance settled. Deposit forfeited. Account closed. Marcus had included a sticky note. Clean exit. Thanks for not stepping back in. That mattered more than repayment. Because stepping back in would have kept the cycle alive. Instead, they stepped forward. On the 6-month mark of that original phone call, we had dinner again, this time at my apartment. Dad insisted on bringing dessert. It wasn't elaborate, just pie from a grocery store bakery. We sat around my small table, the one he once evaluated as temporary. No one commented on square footage. No one mentioned investors. At one point, Caleb asked, "Aunt Carr, why didn't you just help again?" The room went quiet. It wasn't accusatory, just curious. I looked at him carefully. Because sometimes helping too much keeps people from growing. He thought about that. So, you made Dad and Uncle Marcus grow? I smiled slightly. No, I let them. Dad nodded slowly. That's true. Brooke added softly. It was hard, but necessary, Marcus finished. We didn't romanticize it. We didn't turn it into a morality play. We just acknowledged it. That night after everyone left, I stood in my apartment and looked around. Same furniture. Same truck parked outside. Same quiet. Nothing in my life had expanded. But everything felt aligned. I thought back to that first sentence. This party isn't for losers. At the time, it felt like rejection. Now, it felt like a filter. The kind that strips away performance and leaves only structure. I didn't cancel the lease to embarrass anyone. I canceled it because I refused to finance a version of myself that didn't exist, and I refused to subsidize an image that couldn't sustain itself. There's a difference between punishing someone and letting them face math. Math doesn't care about pride. It doesn't care about appearances. It just balances. And when it finally did, Everything got quieter. Smaller house. Older car. Lower ego. Stronger footing. If you've ever been the silent guarantor in your family, the one holding the spreadsheet together while everyone else takes credit, I hope you remember this. Boundaries are not cruelty. Withdrawal is not revenge. Sometimes it's the only way balance returns. About 9 months after that night, the one that started with a single sentence, I found myself standing in the bleachers again. No investors. No catered dinners. Just a Saturday morning soccer game in a public park outside Austin. The field was uneven. The goals were slightly crooked. Parents sat in folding chairs with thermoses and lawn blankets. Ordinary. Marcus stood beside me, hands in his jacket pockets. No luxury watch. No performance in his posture. Just a dad watching his son. Caleb scored in the second half. Nothing dramatic. Just a clean pass and a solid kick. When he ran toward the sideline afterward, he didn't look at his friends first, he looked at his father. And Marcus smiled without hesitation. Not a curated smile. Not a networking smile. A real one. That's enough, Dad said quietly from my other side. I glanced at him. What is this? He said, nodding toward the field. This is enough. I let that sit. Because coming from him, it wasn't small. After the game, we all walked toward the parking lot together. The used Explorer was parked beside my truck. Not polished, not impressive, but paid for. Marcus unlocked it, and Caleb climbed in without complaint. Sophia ran up to me. Aunt Car, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you. I crouched down slightly. Strong how? Like you don't need anyone to fix stuff for you. I smiled. That kind of strength isn't about not needing people, I said. It's about knowing when to stand on your own. She nodded seriously, like she was storing that for later. Dad lingered near the back of the car. You ever regret it? He asked quietly. Regret what? Pulling out? I considered the question carefully. No, I said. I regret waiting so long. He absorbed that. If you hadn't, he said slowly, we'd still be pretending. Yes. He looked at the Explorer. Then at the townhouse down the street we could just barely see from the parking lot. I was afraid of looking small, he admitted. And now I was confusing small with insufficient. That was the closest he'd come to articulating it. Small house. Smaller circle. Simpler life. None of it meant failure. It meant proportion. We stood there a moment longer before everyone began loading up. As I walked toward my truck, Dad called after me. Carmen. I turned. You weren't the loser, he said plainly. I know, but I needed to say it again. I nodded once. Thank you. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was earned. That evening back in my apartment, I pulled out the letter he'd written months earlier. I read it again, not because I needed reassurance, but because I wanted to remember what changed. Not them. Me. The night I canceled the guarantor and autopay, I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because something finally became clear. If someone tells you you don't belong in the room, you don't finance the room. If someone measures worth by what you drive or where you live, you don't subsidize the illusion. And if you love people, sometimes you love them enough to let gravity work. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was recalibration. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that simply removes imbalance. 3 years of quiet covering ended with one clear boundary. And from there, everything adjusted. Marcus learned to budget. Brooke learned to sell homes that matched reality. Dad learned that pride built on appearances collapses. And I learned that strength isn't in how much you can carry. It's in knowing when to set it down. If you've ever been the quiet backbone of your family, if you've ever signed your name to something just to keep the peace, I hope this story reminds you of something important. You can love people without financing their denial. You can step back without stepping away. And you can correct a dynamic without destroying a relationship. Sometimes the most powerful sentence isn't shouted. It's said calmly. Winners pay their own bills. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced a moment where you had to choose between comfort and clarity, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more stories about family boundaries and finding steady ground in complicated relationships, make sure you subscribe. We share stories like this every day. Let's keep the conversation going.